Hi, everybody. I am back again with my dear friend, Will Shelton, also my former high school biology teacher. And well, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, and I trust you are.
I am, thank you very much. When we finished the last video, the last thing that I think we talked about, that I said I wanted to talk about, was scientific and religious dogma. And I feel like that could be an ongoing conversation. But I also had a couple other things I wanted to ask you about, so we can always come back to the scientific and religious dogma if you'd like. Okay, so here's my first one.
Okay.
We now know definitively that all alcohol of every kind is poison. It doesn't matter what kind it is. It's a poison to the system. And so I'm curious about how, because I have my own thoughts about this. I'm curious how you hold that up against Jesus's first miracle of turning water into wine, which, by the way, is hands down my favorite miracle for a couple of different reasons that I can tell you in a little bit. But so
Okay.
it is. It's my favorite miracle. Well, here's the thing. Well, I'll tell you my two things about this miracle, why I love it so much. I love that it was the first one. I love that it's the only miracle attributed that Jesus performed that was for pure pleasure. There was no healing involved, like nobody was coming back to life, nobody was recovering from cancer. It was just pure pleasure. The other thing that I love about this miracle and the story is, as you know, this took place at a wedding. Mm-hmm. And apparently Mary and Jesus were both at this wedding. And the deal is they ran out of wine or whatever beverages they were serving, apparently wine and what, I don't know what else. Anyway, and the story goes, remember, the comment is, well, normally the host will wait, until everybody's wasted, and then they bring out like the Boone's Farm. But exactly. Not you, my brother. You bring out the big stuff, like the top shelf.
Exactly.
Stuff, right. And so I love the fact that basically everybody was just drunk off their butts, and then Jesus made more wine.
Something like that. Yes.
Yeah, something like that. So I'm curious, like what do you do with that? What do you do? Okay, knowing that alcohol is a poison to the system, what do you do with that being Jesus's first miracle in this context?
I don't do anything with it. I think it's humorous when people say, well, yes, it says that Jesus turned water into wine, but that wine had no alcohol in it. He wouldn't do that. And when it clearly states what you just said, that yes, it obviously had alcohol in it. At least I take it that way. So yes, I think anything in excess is toxic and poisonous, and alcohol is that way. And I guess if you break it down to a half a glass, there are still toxins in it. But I mean, we're surrounded by toxins in one way or another. So I don't stress over it. I will tell you that the last drink of alcohol I had was on January 30th. Some people stopped by here on a Sunday evening and had some wine with them, and I had some with them. And I thought, I'll make a run to the store later this week and get some. No, I don't really want to go. I'll go next week. Well, no, I'll go the next week. And so then I read all this stuff about, the great effects you get when you don't drink alcohol. You're going to sleep so much better. You're going to look so much better. Let me just tell you, none of that's working. Okay. I think I need to go back and have a glass of wine tonight before I go to bed. But I don't get hung up on that. I don't. I don't know if that
Oh,
answers your question.
oh no, it wasn't. I knew it wasn't something like a hang up for you. I was just curious. So for me, I guess I'm putting it in the, what do I want to say here?
You want to say that if it's toxic, why does how as a Christian, when we're supposed to revere our bodies as a temple of Christ and of God, why would we? How do I feel about putting a toxin in my temple? Is that what you
Nah,
want?
nah.
Okay.
That
Okay.
sounds
What do
more
you
like an
want?
accusation, and I don't mean it like that in the least.
Okay.
No, no. I figure that's actually kind of easy. I mean, we also know wine, for example, certain kinds of wine is very therapeutic. It can also be medicine. So I would say, first of all, that I believe, or as far as I know, all poison can be turned into medicine. Everything from
Yeah. Arsenic.
scorpion venom, and snake
Yeah.
venom, to various plant medicines that
Hmm.
we consider toxic, but they're also medicine.
Well, let
So,
me just state for the record that whatever alcohol I have consumed in my life was strictly for medicinal purposes.
yeah, absolutely. I have no doubts there too.
Okay. What's your
So
next
impressed.
question?
Mm, no, I do love, maybe it's more that I wanted to talk about the miracle itself. I do love that this was not only his first miracle, but that it was just for pure pleasure. And, you and I, excuse me, on our last discussion and previous discussions not recorded, have talked about the distinctions between the masculine and the feminine as like universal forces of nature. And the feminine is very much about pleasure. And that could be physical, mental, emotional, just pleasure in general. And so I love that his first miracle was so much a part of that part of the feminine. And I also love that his mom was the one who was like, oh, you know what you should do?
Yeah.
They don't have any wine. This is your chance.
Yeah.
I
There's a
love
new
it.
video. There's a new video series out. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called The Chosen, and we are watching that.
Is
And
it fiction? Like, is it like a fictional series?
no, it's depictions of the life of Christ and happenings in his life. And one of those was the wedding feast, and they ran out of wine. And his mother came to him and said, "You're going to have to do something," because she wanted to save her friends from embarrassment from running out of wine. And I thought sometimes I struggle with those kinds of shows because they put things in there that aren't necessarily in the Bible. I'm like, well, where does it say that?
Yeah.
But I'm learning to lighten up on that a little bit, to have a little grace on that. But I thought it depicted that whole scene very well. That he said, "It's not my time." When his mother said, "You need to do this," he said, "It's not my time." But
Yeah.
but she was in a bit of desperation, I think, wanting her friends to not be embarrassed by running out of wine at this major event. And so he said, "Okay, Mom, I'll do it." So yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's interesting. I'd be curious to see it. I love to hear you say that you're softening on that kind of thing where people sort of insert their ideas or maybe a fictionalized account of what could have taken place. I absolutely understand your trepidation because that was something I was very rigid about when I was when I was immersed in religion, Christian religion, just because probably a lot of it had to do with the fact that I did grow up Jehovah's Witness, which is a very, very rigid, very defined. We're told what to think, what to feel, how to behave. Everything is dictated for you. Everything is dictated. And so when something ventures outside of that, it was alarming and weird, especially once I stopped being part of the Jehovah's Witness group. And I didn't really know what to do with that. But now I'm at a place where I love I love myth. I love story. This is how we learn about the universe. This is how we learn about each other. Um, and so to add some fictionalization in there or to add speculation in there, and now I like it. I think it's rather beautiful because there are so many different ways to speculate and so many different, well, I say that. I have one other trepidation about speculating in this way. And that is we are really, really bad about taking the old or taking like what's happening in the present and overlaying it on the past and acting as if, you know, we know what we're talking about or they didn't know what they were talking about or whatever. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I think what I'm talking about is cultural and historical relevance as found in the Bible would be very different than storylines for today. But that doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make them bad or good or anything. It just is.
Mhm.
I kind of feel like I'm rambling. Is that
Okay. It's okay.
nonsensical?
My only concern with inserting interpretation, and sometimes it's not even interpretation, it's just a little sidebar that they throw into these video productions that really have nothing to do with anything. It's just a slippery slope to me, because if you keep inserting and deviating from what's there, you may end up out in left field, you know. So I like keeping it as close to the actual as possible because that's what's realistic to me. But that's just me.
And that makes perfect sense. The only pushback I would have to that we have the assumption that what is said, all the red letters and everything that's not red letters, that it's all 100% factual. Except that the Bible itself, in terms of all the books that were combined to make one big book, the stories that went in, it was determined by a group of old white men who sat around and were like, yes, no, yes, no. And so they are the ones that get to make that determination. And that's where I have a struggle with, well, but so how do we know? Like, how do we know what's fact and what's fiction? Why are you chuckling?
I'm chuckling because I had this exact conversation with my older son last week.
Oh, I mean, fantastic.
It's really crazy the way we seem to be. I seem to be in a parallel universe with conversations with you and conversations with Will. We're just, it's just bizarre, but
I love it.
I do too. I do too.
Okay, so
it lets me rehearse with one of you before I talk to the other one, because it's going to be the same conversation.
Then give me what you got. What was your script with Will?
He was just saying, and it's exactly what you just said, that how can you view the Bible as a holy document when people decided what goes in it? My statement to that would be all of the documents may have been holy. It's just that these were the ones that were included. But the bottom line is all of the documents, whether they were or were not included, were reflections and stories on the life of Christ. They're all related. And just because some weren't included in this book that we know as the Bible doesn't mean they necessarily don't have value. And it doesn't, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Because I'm thinking of like apocryphal texts, you know, and the Gnostic Gospels and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you feel about those? Or do you have a feeling?
I don't stress over it. So my older brother, Ben, since I was like 6, he's had this saying that I quote all the time: don't sweat the small stuff. I say that about everything. And to me, that's one of them. You know, the Bible that I have, that I know, that I read, is sufficient for me. And because other documents weren't included in it, doesn't lessen its worth in my mind.
Sure, that makes sense. And I can relate to that. I do wonder about overlaying past with present. There's this really, I think it's in the Tao Te Ching. I'm going to really botch this. So here's what it is.
Go for it.
Basically, okay, it says something like using an old text or a text from the past, sacred or otherwise, as a guide for the present is like rowing out into the middle of a lake, dropping a stone in, and then you leave and come back and try to find a stone, and you're not going to find it. I'm not, don't take that as criticism of any kind about how you or anyone interprets the Bible. It's just more a matter of, because I also want to clarify that there are plenty of ancient texts, sacred and otherwise, that have value for the present, of course. And I certainly find some beauty from especially the New Testament. The Old Testament is much more disturbing to me, but I really appreciate the history and the culture, the Hebrew culture, Jewish culture, and understanding just how it influenced their lives. It's just that we don't live in that world anymore. So here's an example. This is a great, wow, this is perfect. A great segue to the other thing I was going to bring up. Spanking children, there are studies that show how it reduces gray matter in the brain, which affects learning and emotional and cognitive stability later in life. And so we have this one verse in the Bible, I can't remember where, somewhere in the middle, probably Proverbs, referencing, I don't know, something about beating your kid with a rod. And I'm sure I'm probably botching that as well. But do you know what I'm talking about?
Spare the rod, spoil the child kind of thought.
Yeah,
right.
That along that line.
Yep.
And so I'm looking back at their culture, and it was a very violent culture. There was a lot of destruction. There was a lot of war, a lot of genocide. So it just feels like a very destructive group of people in a way, just based on their own work from the Bible. And so I can understand how in that mindset, corporal punishment would be like, that's what they would do, because it was just a very rigid structure to how they operated and functioned. And I'm not saying that I understand it and I'm excusing it. I'm saying I understand where they're coming from. And so now I wonder with you, because that was Old Testament. But I do wonder, like, what do you do with that? We know that now about, brain damage. I actually had not a conversation. Somebody online had mentioned something about the abuse that they had suffered growing up, corporal punishment at the hands of their parents. And their dad was a worship minister, a worship leader at various churches. And there was a lot of physical abuse that happened. And somebody chimed in and said something about being spanked and how great it was for them and for their children. And I chimed in and commented about the brain damage. And the response, of course, was, well, I don't have brain damage and I was spanked as a child, which, of course, that's sort of a natural pushback from people. But I'm curious, what do you do with that? Yeah, let me just stop there. What do you do with that?
Well, first of all, I think we all have brain damage of one sort or another, right? I mean, because we do lay our past on our present, which transfers to our future, and we carry stuff with us that we need to drop, but it affects our way of thinking, our way of relating to others. So we're all brain damaged for whatever reason. So far as corporal punishment goes, I think there is a major difference in spanking and beating. That's just me. I was raised in a household with a very stringent father who wanted what was best for his three sons, but there were lines you did not cross. And if you did cross them, you were met with a belt across your butt. And most of the time, those were certainly spankings. There were one or two in my life, one in particular, where oh my goodness, I'm never going to cross that line again, because that was a serious smackdown with a belt.
Mhm.
And so I carried that past into my then future when my children came along. I had two boys. And so a belt was used in my home, but very sparingly. And I had a discussion with Will a couple of weeks ago that, probably looking back, I probably could have said, because we were very involved with our boys. I think,
Right.
I think Jenny and I were pretty good parents, for the most part. We were involved. We listened. We talked. We were involved. So I told him a couple of weeks ago, I think looking back, I probably could have said, Will, you really disappointed me there, and we don't need to do that again. And that probably would have been sufficient. I don't know. But I do know that I never beat my children.
Right.
And I do know that there are children out there who are totally out of control. And I'm thinking of one right now who he's a hellion. And I worry about his future, because there is no structure in his life whatsoever. None. He has no respect for anything or anyone. And my dad used a line with me when we became pregnant with our first one. He said, I'm going to give you one piece of parenting advice, and I'll never say anything else about how you parent your children. He said, children are like mules. If you don't break them by the time they're 2, they'll never be broken. And I don't think he meant break their spirit. That's not what he meant. He didn't mean you have to be this domineering, go out and beat your child into submission. He was just saying they need some structure in their life, at an early age, or there's going to be some reckoning down the road. So as for me, to answer your question after all that rambling, I am not opposed to corporal punishment per se, but I'm sickened by abuse. Because as a school administrator or even as a teacher, I saw abuse. I had to report abuse, and it's sickening. And it's like, how could anybody do that to your child? But again, I think there's a major difference in beating and abusing and spanking.
Sure. I would also add, I understand that there's a time and place for everything. And I also know that every kid is different. I have 2 kids that are as much oil and water as me and their father were. They're just night and day differences. And I had one incredibly easy child and one rather difficult child. Yeah, that gets tough. I know when my kid, I didn't spank them very much at all. One of them didn't need it.
Yeah.
He was just so easygoing and just wanted to please so desperately. And then the other one was like, screw you, I'm gonna do what I want.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
so
when my two are 3 years apart. And so I'm guessing Will was probably 7-ish, which would have made Thomas 4-ish. That's pretty close to where we were. They did something. I don't remember what it was. They either spouted off to Jenny, or they lied to her, or I don't remember what it was. But I said, all right, we're going to go into the bathroom one at a time here. And we're going to get a swat on the bottom with a belt. And I took William in there first and gave him a couple little swats. And he starts just bawling, I'm so sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry. I'm never doing that again. Send him out, bring Thomas in, do the exact same thing. He looked up at me over his shoulder and said, are you done yet? Oh, I just wanted to destroy somebody at that moment. Yes, they were radically different. So I get it.
I made that mistake once with my stepdad. I think it was more along the lines of, that didn't hurt.
Yeah, well, we can fix that, right?
Yeah. And that was the last time he spanked me, actually. That was the end. Like that was it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a weird topic. I guess I have no qualms with, if you're teaching your children to not run out into the road, and if they're starting to, I totally see a SWAT of some sort, or putting your hand on the stove, like,
Yeah.
because I actually I read something the other day, someone was even criticizing that, but it can cause, my child's life could end if I didn't put a stop to him or her running out into the street, or they could be grossly deformed or have, need surgery. What are horrific stories of kids who dump boiling water on them. And
Yeah.
so I feel like those are justifiable events or whatever to administer some kind of intensity. And for some children, that could just be a yell. I'm not saying yell regularly. I'm just saying, like, if your kid's about to run into the street, that yell for some children is more than enough. I don't know. It's just a really weird topic. I guess I just come back to this. I am not in the business of telling anybody what they should or shouldn't do, what they should think or feel, because I feel like that would make me no different than religion if I did that. For me, I guess it comes down to, everything just comes down to a question of this. We have destroyed so much. I have to ask myself now, okay, is this destructive, what I'm doing, or is this life-giving? Is it creative in some way? And so I guess that even comes down to it for discipline with children. Is this a destructive thing that is happening, or am I giving life to my child somehow?
I personally think it's more destructive not to put boundaries and limits. There have to be limits.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just like society. If there were no laws, if there were no restrictions, this world would be absolute chaos. Mm-hmm. Which it's becoming, by the way, because we're losing the structure. But I think the same thing applies to a child. I think a child has a much brighter future if they have some limits and they understand boundaries in their own behavior. I think that is life-giving. Yeah. I think to turn them loose and let them go amok is destructive. But again, you can do that without beating your child.
Absolutely. In my anthropological studies, I was always fascinated by tribes that reared children, like collectively. There are actually two that stand out to me. One is a tribe, I know it was in Africa, but I don't remember where. This was a tribe of people who essentially the whole community reared the children together. So when an infant is born, the infant stays with the mom, and the fox sleeps with them for the first few months. And then after a while, they start passing the baby around, and different families will care for the baby. And the baby's just always a part of this one large family. Mm-hmm. Those children grow up so secure and calm and stable. I think that's absolutely beautiful. There was another tribe or village that I read about. This is not quite along the same lines, but sort of. So I believe right around, this is a fascinating one. This is one you will not agree with, but I think it's fascinating.
How do you know I'm not going to agree? So you're putting me in a box. Don't put me in a box.
You're right. I shouldn't, but hold on.
Okay.
You may listen to this and be like, oh my God, that's a great idea. We should all do this. But I have a feeling that won't happen.
Go for it.
Okay. So right around 12 years old or so, this tribe sends all their children to like a neighboring area. It's part of their community in one way or another, but it's also separated. They send all the kids there. and it's not like Lord of the Flies, but it's because they're given tools in the way that they're reared before they even enter into this space. But right around 12 years old, everybody goes and they stay there until 18, 19 years old. They all live together. And the thing that I thought was the most amazing about it is that the kids are allowed to explore their sexuality in every way that they want to or feel compelled to. And so they're separated in this space, and they're allowed this room to be able to do this and to understand themselves and to learn how all these things work. Nobody gets divorced. Like they go through this and then they get married. There's no divorce. Everyone is very calm and stable. They don't have jealousy issues. It is just another way of doing things. But I was absolutely fascinated by that one because I loved that it gave the kids the ability to just make these choices for themselves through trial and error. I was not so as a Jehovah's Witness, with all of your thoughts dictated, your behavior dictated, everything is dictated. I never had a chance to make mistakes and learn from them. Mm-hmm. So when I left that life right around 21, 22, yeah. I was like a sitting duck. I didn't have an opportunity to acquire wisdom along the way. So it never occurred to me that people would be malicious towards me. It never occurred to me that people would use me or anything like that. And so I ended up in a very destructive situation. I'm not saying that that's connected to sexuality from when I was younger. I'm just talking about the rules and regulations. And the ability to give kids the ability to make mistakes. That one might, like, if we're talking in terms of sexuality for a 12-year-old, that sounds over the top for our Western minds. Don't take it quite as literally when I say that. I'm just talking about the ability to make choices so that when you do enter the real world or whatever, the adult world, you actually have some experience under your belt. You have something to work with, which is something I was not afforded. So I respect what this particular tribe does just to give their kids that ability, that chance to learn and some autonomy. And then like I said, there's no divorce, there's no jealousy. Everybody is a very, very calm, stable, secure tribe. So
let me do a sidebar here right quick. Okay.
Oh, good.
You've touched on something twice that I have to respond to. You said a few moments ago that you don't like telling people what to do because that's what religion does, or you said that's like religion.
Yeah.
And then you just mentioned that you were raised in a very stringent, confined religion.
Correct.
See, I don't view Christianity that way. I don't. Yes, there are a couple of major cornerstones. Mm-hmm. if you're a Christian, you're going to believe this. Mm-hmm. But I think there is great freedom in being a Christian, and freedom in thought, freedom in expression, freedom in creativity, freedom in being oneself. I think it's a freeing experience. So anyway, that's just a sidebar.
No, I'm so glad you said that because it wasn't freeing for me at all. It was.
I get that.
Yeah, and it largely, I'm sure, has to do with how it was presented. In our last conversation, I think I talked about this, where my view of God was I was given a very stern, cruel view of God.
Yeah.
And I know, I'm sure, no doubt, I carried some of that into when I left the Jehovah's Witness background, and then I entered I became a Christian in a Baptist church. Never considered myself Baptist. I know I still carried some parts of my past over in terms of my perceptions of God. So I have to, own that. Yeah. And when it comes to my even current perceptions or how it was presented to me in the past. the presentation matters. I love what you just said, because for you that it was liberating and freeing, that's, I think, how it should be. But from my perspective, most of, particularly within the Abrahamic religions, so that's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, that and I mean no disrespect by this at all, I just feel that by and large, religion, especially these, have taken the sacred and made it profane in so many ways. That you had this experience, I love it. I wish that God had been presented to me in that way. It just never was. And so then when I entered Reformed theology, it got, all of the liberty that I think I found before got really reined in, and it felt so constricting all the time. And when I would say things to people about, my perspectives, they're like, but I don't feel that way. I'm like, yeah, but it's right here. And this is my experience. I'm like, yeah, but I just don't see it that way. Yeah. So I have a lot of baggage. I did have baggage. I've worked through those things, and I'm just in a different place now. Yeah. But thank you for saying that.
Well, I need to clarify that growing up, in many ways, God was presented to me as a very stringent force or deity. But faith is a choice. You choose to trust, you choose to believe, you choose to honor, you choose to depend. And just really in the last year, I've had some experiences that have caused my faith to deepen. And the deeper my faith goes, the more freedom I feel. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's beautiful. If you're willing to elaborate, I'd love to hear it, but I also understand there could be very private, so I'm fine with just that.
No, it's okay. I was, well, because I met you for lunch with Tony Elgin in Denver.
Yeah.
That Tony and I were invited to attend this thing in Encampment, Wyoming, which turned out to be a camp which is designed to give Christian leaders a respite because they feel burned out. And Tony and I, we were like, why are we here? We're not Christian leaders. We're not burned out. The first night we were there was a time of discussion, and we went around the room, and it came my time to speak. And the question was, what do you struggle with? What are you struggling with as you come here to this group? And it was 24 men from all over the world. I knew Tony and I knew Ray Zerker, and that was it. I didn't know anybody else. So here I am in front of these 23 other guys, and I said, I was a school administrator, and due to health reasons, I had to retire much earlier than I had planned, and I've lost my purpose. I don't know what my purpose is. And this booming voice from across the room from Paul, an Australian, I wrote about this in my book that I just finished, by the way. I just finished my book.
Congratulations. That's
thank
huge.
You.
You're welcome.
Paul pointed at me and he said, your purpose is to love God and serve your fellow man. And I was like, dang, who is this guy? But he had this incredible passion about him that was intriguing to me. And we prayed together later that night. And I just felt this incredible peace come over me. And now I don't look at the stock market every day. I don't stress over what's in our checking account. I don't, it's just gone. It's gone. The second day we were there, it was time to discuss something. And it was, what's one thing you hope to accomplish during our week here together? And I really didn't give any thought. I'm just listening to all these other people as we go around the room, and it got to me, and it just came out of nowhere. I said, I need to let go and let God. And again, it was like, whew, it's just freeing. There's freedom in that statement. And so ever since I have returned, I just think it's a God thing that you and I are having these discussions, that Will and I are having these discussions, that Jenny and I have had discussions that show that we're more on the same page, I guess you would say, as we've ever been. I think there are just things happening in my life that I cannot deny.
Mhm.
And I attribute those to the Holy Spirit acting in my life. And I think it's awesome.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're very welcome. Thank you for allowing me to share that.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. And I would like to speak to just a little part of that. You did something pretty specific. You kind of went through a rite of passage. And when I talk about rites of passage, these are big mile markers in life. Many traditions around the world still use rites of passage as initiations, spiritual initiations, shamanic initiations. Of course, historically, they were used all the time for everything. And the going through a rite of passage was a very specific event. So it starts with separation. And in your case, you literally left, you flew across the country, you separated from your normal life.
I was in the middle of nowhere.
And you went in the middle of nowhere, exactly, out in nature,
Yes.
Right? This was
Yes.
a big nature event for you.
Yes.
And then while you're there, you're going through basically different ceremonies. And then when it's over, there's the return, the reincorporation part. And sometime I would like to talk to you about like what it was like for you when you went back, how you have adapted or been changed from what you experienced out in Wyoming, and what that's like for you now. But here's what I wanted to say about ceremony and maybe some science about, you say it's the Holy Spirit. Doesn't matter what you call it to me. I'm good with anything. So the limbic brain needs ceremony for real change to take place. Limbic brain is in part of the midbrain. It needs ceremony for real behavioral change to be effective. When you were sitting in this circle, this was a ceremony for you all. And when you're sharing and putting all of you all looked inward. You had to go inward to figure these things out, and then you discuss them. And then you had this sudden understanding, revelation, or whatever. You need to let go, let God. I see that as surrender in general. That when, the God, the universe, whatever is like just pushing, it feels like it's just pushing back against you and everything is just going to hell, for lack of a better word, then there is something about surrendering in that moment and just letting go and going with the flow that is extremely liberating and quite beautiful. So I see what you went through there as that was you went through a rite of passage because transformation came about. You went into this ceremony with these men and you all met repeatedly. You were out in nature regularly and a transformation happened for you. And you came back, it sounds like you came back a bit of a different person. Would you agree?
Yeah. I did, yes.
Yeah. So ceremony can be elaborate, or it can be something very simple. And in your case, I wouldn't say it was elaborate. It was probably a very simple thing. And yet it had a very powerful impact on you. And I love that. I think that's beautiful. And that's the way it's supposed to be. So yay for you. You grew.
I think it was a God moment. I think I compare it to when I met Jenny. Okay, when I met Jenny, I was 20 years old, 19 years old. I was madly in love with another girl, a Greek girl who was, we were high school classmates. I wanted to date her all through high school. She said no. We got to MTSU. She said yes. We started a relationship. It was beautiful. But our cultures were radically different. Our religious views were significantly different. So while I loved her, and I still do, I think she's a beautiful person. Something inside of me said, you know, you're setting yourself up for some struggles here. There was just an innate awareness, I think, which I didn't realize until months after I met Jenny. Anyway, my college roommate comes home one night and he says, there's a swim party at Stephanie's house tonight. Do you want to go over there and go swimming for a while? I said, sure. So we go and we walk around behind this house, and there's this illuminated swimming pool. And there's a girl standing on the far side of the pool in a black one piece. And I said, who is that? He said, that's Jenny Reynolds. And without any thought at all, I said, I'm going to marry her.
Wow.
I had never said hello to the girl, but just something inside of me knew she's the one. It was amazing. I think that's a God thing. I think what I experienced in Wyoming was a God. I have no doubt that it was a God thing in Wyoming, which is carrying over to today. So, and I think it laid the groundwork for these type discussions. I wrote in my book about Stephen being filled with the Holy Spirit and being able to speak boldly about his faith. And I wrote in my book that I'm having these YouTube conversations with a good friend of mine. And I never dreamt that I would YouTube about anything. I am Mr. Anti-Technology.
Same, sister.
So it's just amazing to me that here we are having these conversations, that I'm having conversations with my son, and I'm having deeper conversations with one of my brothers, and a group of guys that I met with for years. And then we kind of drifted apart. We're back together again, and it's awesome. And I think God is moving in my life. So you can put whatever label you want to on it.
Right.
But to me, it's a God thing.
And I would say that's beautiful. Yeah. Hold on to it, because it's not only sustaining you, it's changing you, and it's making you, it's bringing you closer to who you are, like deep.
I hope so. I hope that's who I am. I wasn't for a long time, but I'm getting there.
Okay, I understand. But let's look at it this way. You stopped here in Denver and we had lunch, me, you, and Tony.
Yep.
Was that August, September?
September 20th.
So this is October, almost 6 months later, and you still, I mean, it changed you, did it not?
It did.
So yeah, so this is beautiful. This is transformation. This is what.
It's surrender.
This is why we're here.
It's what you said a while ago. It is surrender.
Yeah.
I surrendered the night I said I need to let go and let God.
Curious, like when you woke up the next morning, how'd you feel? Or do you even remember?
I was hungry. I don't know. I don't remember how. I mean, it wasn't just this powerful, you know, I've been zapped by a lightning bolt. It was just a very calming, a very real peace fell on me that week. I stopped stressing about a lot of stuff that I stressed about before. I find that I'm generally a calmer person. Jenny won't always agree with that, but I'm a calmer person. I see myself finding beauty in things every day. I see the realization of God in my life every day now in some way. And
it was not like that before September?
It wasn't that way. I mean, I had moments where I was like, wow, that's really cool, you know, or yeah, there were moments, but now it's like a daily presence. I don't know how to tell you. I can't explain it really.
You don't have to. I understand. I know what you mean. We might couch it in different terms. You say God, you say Holy Spirit. I might use something similar, or I might use psychological terms, or I might use brain chemistry terms. But at the end of the day, the same thing is happening. And It's this transformative power that comes from the surrender, and also in the ceremony itself. And I would say it was actually the prayer that you did right then and there. That was the thing that your mind needed. That changed everything for you. This was a formal thing. You separated, you went out, and you did this thing with these men. This is flipping beautiful. I love it.
I think it's what my heart needed.
Yeah.
I have told my men's group for years that I have said many times, I know God in my head. I have a realization of God in my head. But I don't have an overwhelming presence in my heart. And I said that it was like I could never reach the golden ring of getting God in my heart, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that's changed. And I find it to be incredible. So
yeah. So for me, I'd probably call it a sense of divinity or the sacred or whatever. I just have aversion to the word God because of all my.
I get that.
Yeah, it has, but I don't like any of the words. I don't know what word to use.
Mm-hmm.
The everything, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Thank you for sharing that, for being, open. Other people are going to see this. I just appreciate that. And I think it's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I quoted Stephen, the story of Stephen in my book about him being able to speak boldly in faith, because before September, I wouldn't have had this conversation, I don't think. And I certainly wouldn't have it on something that's being recorded to be placed on the internet. There is no way I'm going there. But now it's there's no hesitation.
Yeah. So there's also something about, you went there and you said you didn't know your purpose, and you left knowing your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Once you find it, there's the Bhagavad Gita, which, this is so ridiculous. I've read a great book about the Bhagavad Gita, but I haven't read the Bhagavad Gita itself. But the whole premise here is about your vocation, your calling in life, the thing that you were meant to do here.
Yep.
And two of the biggest takeaways I got from the Bhagavad Gita about that are, one, when you find it, when you know what it is, you go all out. You hold nothing back. You do it because it's something that you have to do. That's it. And the other big takeaway was, you don't do it with a regard for a consequence or for a specific outcome. So actually holding this conversation with you, and I know you need to go, holding these conversations with you, and I have some other people I'm going to have some similar, or actually different conversations with, but these that I'm doing this because this is part of why I'm here. I'm not participating in this with you because I'm hoping for some huge following, or because I want some monetary deal to come out of it. None of that is all completely irrelevant. If no one sees this, it's okay.
Absolutely.
I'm doing it because it's something that I have to do. And so
I'm doing it because I love your mind. I love the way your mind, it's always had these little cogs and chains that turn, and I love your mind.
Well, thank you. That's like the best compliment ever.
You were a great student, even though you probably don't remember anything about the structure of DNA. That's okay. I won't hold that against you. But I mean, through the years, you've babysat my children. You've been a sounding board. I love your mind.
Thank you. And I love having these conversations with you. I like the nature of them. But we're just two curious people talking about things from different perspectives and just sharing those perspectives. And that's beautiful.
Right.
I love it. I love it. So thank you so much for doing this with me. And next time we can totally talk about scientific and religious dogma. Also, I'm super stoked to bring up a topic of conversation regarding reincarnation from like something I found in the Bible that I think is hilarious and I love. So
Okay.
anyway, yeah, just the topics are endless. So thank you for doing this, and we'll do it again soon.
That sounds good. Love you.
All right. Love you too. Bye.
Bye.